You know what stretches my mind? EAN. The wisest person in history ended up making some of the dumbest decisions, like having 700 wives and 300 concubines. That's not just relationship drama, that's an HR nightmare of biblical proportions.
That's such a fascinating way to look at Solomon's story, Grana. And to think it all started with him making what seemed like the perfect choice, asking for wisdom instead of wealth or power.
The early part of his reign is like a masterclass in leadership. When God appeared to him in that dream, he could have asked for anything: wealth, long life, victory over enemies. Instead, he asks for wisdom to govern well. It's like being offered three wishes and using the first one to wish for better decision making.
And that wisdom shows up immediately in that famous case with the two mothers and the baby. It's basically the first recorded use of game theory in conflict resolution.
You know what's really interesting about that case? It wasn't just about determining who was telling the truth. It was about understanding human nature so profoundly that he could predict exactly how a real mother would react. The whole cut the baby in half solution is actually brilliant psychological profiling.
Speaking of brilliant moves, let's talk about this temple he built. 7 years of construction, using materials that had to be imported from all over the ancient world. How did he manage such a massive project?
Well, the text mentions he had about 180,000 workers and 3,300 supervisors. He basically created the first documented large scale project management system. And get this, the stones were so precisely cut at the quarry that they fit together perfectly at the construction site. No hammers or chisels were needed during assembly.
That's incredible engineering for ancient times. But then he spends almost twice as long building his own palace, 13 years. That seems like a red flag in hindsight.
It's like watching someone slowly lose their way in real time. First, it's the palace, then it's the foreign marriages for political alliances. Each decision probably made perfect sense in isolation, but together they created this perfect storm of compromise.
And those compromises had enormous consequences. The kingdom literally splits in half after his death because his son, Rehoboam, makes a terrible leadership decision.
Oh man, that moment is just painful to watch. The people come asking for relief from heavy taxation, and instead of listening to experienced advisors, he goes with his young friends who tell him to act tough. It's like taking financial advice from a TikTok influencer instead of Warren Buffett.
That's when everything really falls apart. The northern tribes break away, and suddenly we've got two kingdoms, each with its own problems.
And then enters one of the most dramatic characters in the entire narrative, Elijah. This guy shows up looking like some wilderness survivalist, walks right up to the king, and announces there's going to be a drought until he says otherwise. Talk about making an entrance.
The showdown on Mount Carmel is one of the most dramatic scenes in ancient literature. How many prophets of Baal were there again?
450, and Elijah lets them go first. They're dancing, shouting, cutting themselves, trying to get their God to send fire. This goes on for hours. Then Elijah has his altar drenched with water 3 times before calling down fire that's so hot it vaporizes everything, including the stones.
That's such a power move. But what happens next really shows the human side of these larger than life figures.
Right? Elijah goes from this incredible victory to complete despair when Jezebel threatens him. He runs into the wilderness, collapses under a broom tree, and basically asks God to let him die. It's this incredibly raw moment of human vulnerability.
And the way God responds is so interesting. First with rest and food, then with that still small voice, not in the earthquake or fire, but in the whisper.
You know what's really striking about this whole narrative? It shows how success often carries the seeds of its own destruction. Solomon's wisdom leads to wealth and power, which in turn lead to compromise, ultimately leading to the kingdom's division. It's like watching a Greek tragedy play out in slow motion.
That's such a profound observation, Grana. It really makes you think about how even our strengths can become weaknesses if we're not careful.
And maybe that's the biggest lesson here. EAN, wisdom isn't just about making good decisions, it's about consistently living according to what we know is true. Even the wisest person in history needed something more than just knowledge. He required the commitment to stay true to his principles.